really key to that. Oh, I think now we're live.
Now we're live. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We want to give everyone just a few seconds to log on here, get everything set up. We actually haven't done one of these in a while.
It's been a while. We didn't know we'd have to do another one.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, everybody, my name is Katie Paris, and I am the founder of Red, Wine, and Blue, a community of suburban women that I am so grateful to get to be a part of every single day because of how we support each other to actually do something in our local communities and to reach out to the people that we know, because we know that we're so much stronger together and we need each other so much right now because it is not easy out there. I asked my mother-in-law to join us tonight because she is a 40-year veteran, probably plus, of
We're just getting older by the day here.
of a child psychotherapist, and just brings not only enormous experience and wisdom to dealing with complicated issues that we face as parents, grandparents, but also how we talk about complicated issues to our kids. And not only does she bring that, but just whenever I can have a talk with Debbie about these complicated situations, I always walk away feeling less overwhelmed. And I think that is something that we all could use just like a little dose of right now, because the feelings that are being expressed are huge in our communities right now. I mean, it's exhaustion, of course, across the board. COVID anxiety is becoming just like a term. It's a thing.
Right.
There's feelings of anger, guilt, enormous frustration. And I think there's so much feelings that people just don't even quite know what to do with all of this energy, and how to even find, some, even just a feeling of how do I get through the day right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about that stuff tonight. Before we get into it, I do just want to make sure that everyone knows that after this chat that we are going to have tonight, we'll talk for about 30 minutes or so. I'm going to be answering a lot of questions that you all have been sharing over the last week when I announced we were going to be having this conversation. The questions flooded in for you. And there were so many amazing questions. I'm going to be reading a lot of them verbatim because I just felt your hearts break open in reading so many of these. But after this conversation, if you want to continue the conversation and talk directly with other women, we are going to be having a Zoom call. We do these sweep salons. Sweep is the name of our national Facebook group, and we're going to be dropping the link in comments. Or you can use that QR code. If you're on a laptop, just put your phone up to that code there on the screen, and you will be able to register and for that call, and then you will be emailed a link directly into the Zoom to be a part of that conversation. So that'll just be like a continuation of this conversation, a debrief. And the other resource I want to let folks know about is that every Wednesday morning, we drop a new episode of our podcast, which is called The Suburban Women Problem. And it's hosted by 3 suburban moms from all over the country who come from different political backgrounds, all sorts of different backgrounds, but share common values and are confronting all of the same things you are day in and day out, and getting really real about it, talking to people with a lot of knowledge on the topics that we all care about a great deal. And so that is another thing that can be helpful to all of you. So that'll be tomorrow morning. A new episode of the Suburban Women Problem will drop, and you can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, so now, are you ready?
I'm ready. I hope I can be helpful. Okay. With that leading, I better be helpful.
No pressure.
No pressure. I'm only your mother-in-law.
Yeah. So Debbie knows a little bit of, school started for us. I have a new first grader just last week. So today was, I think, the 5th day of school. And I'm lucky to live in a school district that is following COVID protocols. They're wearing masks, practicing distancing when possible, all the things. So I had some nervousness about the school year starting, but also excitement, and I wasn't actually expecting to feel much anxiety because I generally, you know me, Debbie, I generally think everything's going to be fine. And
A cockeyed optimist.
and yeah, and I instead found myself walking to the car after dropping him off that first day with my heart beating out of my chest. And I just didn't expect to be so impacted by, you know, not being able to go in with him and settle him into his classroom for the first time. I mean, I wasn't going to stick around all day, but just like, this is your desk. You've never had a desk before. Wow. See ya. Love ya. Not having that, not being able to meet his teacher, with, yeah, I mean, yes, I absolutely want my kid to be going to a school that requires masks, but that doesn't mean it's not hard. It doesn't create limitations. And a lot of women have questions about dealing with that specifically too. So I just think that no matter what our circumstances, no matter where we live, again, I feel like I'm absolutely one of the lucky ones. There are so many degrees of challenges. So, Debbie, the first conversation we had on the internet, when we did like a Facebook Live, was actually the day the schools shut down back in the beginning of the pandemic. And I remember thinking this was going to be like a 3-week thing just to get through. So here we are 18 months later. Can you just talk about like what is going on with our minds and our bodies 18 months into the pandemic, and a little bit of like, why do we feel the way we feel right
I think
now?
there's so many reasons that we're feeling the way we feel. Part of it, I think, is certainly managing our own expectations. We eventually got used to the fact that this wasn't going to be a 3-week deal. And we all figured out, better for worse, what we had to do, what we needed to do, how to do it, and so on and so forth. Then there was a feeling that maybe we were coming out of the pandemic. And everybody expected to feel better, but they didn't. In general, I think what happened was people started, because they were no longer having to meet the same dire things, homeschooling, working at home, trying to take care of sick parents, not being able to see somebody sick, the fear, all of the things that we were all feeling, we all had to do, no choices. The reflective part started coming up on what was the cost of this for all of us? What did we lose? So it was almost like grieving when that started ending. And then Delta came along. And it's like a re-traumatization. In other words, it hit the same fault lines for all of us. We can't control it, the political implications of it, where we feel helpless, what are we going to do, and the mystery of it. We can't predict exactly what's going to happen. So I'd say helplessness is one of the things that has sort of undermined a lot of people's adjustment to this, because it's, are we helpless? And if we're not helpless, what are we supposed to do? And how much can we really affect with that? And then what do we do with our feeling states? Because it's helpless. But the other thing you referred to was anger. And I think anger comes along with being helpless, but anger also comes along with being angry. There are things to be angry about. So I think that's one of the things we might be talking about. Yeah. And then the grieving part, you were talking about not getting to settle your son in. Their son's name is Lincoln. I happen to know it. One of the things that the pandemic has done is interfered with the natural sort of moments in our lives that are important, that we've always sort of thought about. And one of the things when we're settling a kid into school, the younger they are, is we feel comfortable when we've invested the place and we know the place where they are and we can envision it. Yeah. When we know the people they're with. So it's not just sending them off to a bunker someplace. And everybody is missing the relational piece of this to some degree, and missing the transitions, whether it was high school graduation, whether it was, some kind of rite at your church or temple, that there were just so many things that got missed. So it's a big bundle of too much feeling. And I think what we want to think about is, what do we do with it so that we don't feel so helpless with all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I do want to, as I said, just share some of the things that were shared with us in our community over the last week or so that reflects the feelings of so many women. So here's one. This is from Wendy. And she says, as a nursing instructor, I'm terrified of my son getting COVID. The pediatric ICU units are full of kids intubated or on O2. Having said that, my son did not do well mentally, emotionally, or academically when he was homeschooled last year. I live in a county where very few people believe in masks or getting vaccinated. And while I require my son to wear a mask in school, the fact that 95% of the other students don't gives me so much anxiety. My son is 11 and not eligible for the vaccine. Of course, no one under 12. So my question is, how do I navigate this and not work myself into a frenzy?
Oh, well, I'm sorry about all of this. Let me start with that. And I think your job is putting you in front of the worst outcomes possible that are true and real, but not necessarily as big as what you're seeing. You're seeing a group where this has gone very badly, all of which is real and all of which is possible. And you're also in a position where you can't control what your son is going to be confronting and what's happening. So you're balancing sort of difficult choices. The isolation, the not being in school, the kids really, one of the positive outcomes of this in the long run, we're not there yet, is kids are going to want school. The kids that have not done well with being at home, this is their community. You know, you talk about child development, you talk about the first community is the family, then the extended family, and then school. So kids are really missing the growth factor of school. You weigh that for your son against the health risk of sending him to a place that is not going to be COVID safe. And what does that mean? I think one of the things about anxiety is it's when you feel so responsible to make the right outcome. This is not about right and wrong and what your decision is. This is about going one way or the other and what's acceptable risk to you, what you can manage. What I do want to say, and this is a bigger discussion, is he's 11. When he's 12, he can get the vaccine. We are not talking about making plans for the next 3 years. Katie and I were talking about that. We're making plans for the next 3 months. Once kids can be vaccinated, it's a whole game changer in terms of decision-making trees. And we're not talking about waiting another year for a vaccine for the kids. Now, you're a nurse, so you might know more than I do about this, but I believe that's so from everything the CDC is saying, everything that every expert is saying. It's coming. So to shrink it down to size will help. To shrink the situation down to size shrinks the anxiety down to size. You just need to figure out what you're going to do for a few months.
Yeah.
And if you decide to send him to school, good for him that he's wearing his mask. The opportunity to talk about choices people make and how different people are, believing what you believe and doing what you know is right. At 11 years old, that's a really good growth experience.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in particular. That comes up a lot. And I also just want to say, Wendy, I think you're crushing it. And thank you for being a frontline worker and, making these tough decisions and navigating it with your kid, even when it's hard.
And your kid knows how much you care about this.
Yeah.
This is a growth time as well as a difficult time. So I'm going to second what Katie's saying. You're doing great. No matter what you decide to do, you're doing great, and it won't be forever. And you're definitely not alone.
Right. So on this issue of masks, I mean, something that I have noticed, and from everything I read from other women, is the younger kids. My 6-year-old, for example, he doesn't care about wearing a mask. Like, it's no big deal. He's like, what adults like, chill. What is the big deal? And I think that that's true for, depending on the community, true for as the kids get a little bit older. But there are other kids as they do get older who feel frustrated. Like, oh, I don't want to do this. How do you suggest parents have those conversations with their kids, especially considering that in some communities, wearing a mask means getting bullied, getting made fun of?
So there's a lot in that. So to unpack it a little bit, first of all, there's a developmental thing that happens as kids get older where they don't want to do what people are telling them to do. And that's normal, developmental. It's not it can feel like defiance, but it's sort of, wait a minute, I can make my own decisions. Yeah. But I think before we get to the bullying question, I think what one appeals to in this is kids actually like to feel safe, and kids actually know what they can do to increase safety, and that's wear a mask. So if one identifies a negative feeling, you don't like being told what to do, you're sick of wearing a mask, you want to be a regular teenager or a kid with, and seeing people's faces, this is incredibly annoying. Anybody likes having their feelings validated and heard. But if you identify it, then our job is to help them with the adaptation and mastery piece. The idea of identifying feelings is to help kids do better. So what you want to do is say, given that I understand how frustrating this is. We're not talking about forever, but do you really want to make other people unsafe? Would that feel good? If you got somebody sick, you'd feel terrible. So there are things to appeal to in their higher level thinking that balances out when they are felt acknowledged. If you don't acknowledge a feeling, it gets bigger and louder and more. And we don't want to do that. We're trying to shrink everything down to manageable bits. And so that's one thing. The bullying thing, Katie was raising this beforehand, and partly, if it wasn't bullying about masks, it would be bullying about something else. Wearing glasses, not playing the right sport, wearing a stupid shirt, talking to the wrong kid. Bullying happens. And what we want to do is help our children feel strong inside themselves in facing somebody that's being demeaning and confrontational and humiliating. And one of the things that is happening around this whole discussion is the attempt to humiliate. And humiliation is a very difficult feeling to navigate. And we don't want our children to feel humiliated. And the way to help them not feel humiliated is to point out that somebody else is having the problem, not them. And there's a great line: somebody can pitch, but you don't have to catch. And when somebody is bullying, they're actually asking you to catch the other side of the feeling. And what you want to do is drop the ball. And, so you really want to help kids with the bullying aspect of it, taking out the huge anxiety we all have about health and masking. The bullying thing is just like it's going to happen about something. And this, at the moment, it's happening about masks. Not to diminish it as a difficulty, but it's to sort of normalize it as a difficulty.
Right. Some of these things, because we haven't lived through a pandemic before, I think sometimes we feel like this is so singular. How can I possibly get through this? It's the worst thing that could ever happen. But yeah, that's true. Kids don't like that.
Well, and in raising kids, you tend to feel everything is, oh my God, what's happening? Because we're always one step behind them. I mean, they're moving ahead in the development. We're thinking, what? And it's good to sort of normalize development in the middle of something that's so difficult.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about the emotional impacts of some of these protocols that are hard to, we want, but they're hard to manage. So Diana wrote, my granddaughters are 5, 4, and 2. So you're going to relate to this. They have not had a typical young childhood. They only know masks and separation. Others spoke of various situations that have led them to make the choice to homeschool or enroll in online school. And their question is, what kind of impact will this have for our children's social emotional learning, and how can we ensure that they are developing in all emotional areas while keeping them safe? Okay,
I'm going to be very reassuring on this one. There are a lot of different ways of growing up, and a lot of things happen to kids along the way. And they end up mastering things with our help. And the best way to help children stay on their developmental track is to manage our own anxiety so that we're helping them in development regardless of the situation. Whether they're homeschooled or at school, they're handling their inner lives developmentally, and our job is to help them to master themselves. And if that's around their anger, or they're getting wild, or they're learning, we're encouraging them. But I think your question is, how traumatic is this for kids? Because a trauma is a different thing. I don't think that this is traumatic for kids. I think this is difficult. Yeah. But I was reflecting, my husband was actually reflecting, in World War II, kids missed 3 years of school and then went back to school, and were happy to be back to school and got educated. What I think is challenging is that it isn't linear the way we expect education and the developmental track to go in terms of entering the world. We've now had a disruption, so it's more zigzag. I give teachers an incredible amount of credit because they're having to assess where each kid that's coming back to school is, and they're not all in the same place. That doesn't mean that they won't all get to the same place. There are a lot of ways from here to there that are fine. And I think that the young kids, can I tell the story about your right at the, okay, so my grandson, when he was around 2, Katie was going to return something to an Amazon thing, and the return place was at Whole Foods. And she's holding, right? And returning it, and he turns to her and said, Mommy, there are so many things. He hadn't been in a store. These are the things that are not, that
in his memory anyway.
In his memory,
Yeah.
but for half his life, he's been living in the pandemic. And that's the reality he knows. But the real reality that the young children know is the family. So the degree to which the grown-ups in our kids' lives can navigate this, communicate protection and mastery to them is the degree that the children are going to be fine. It's the old Mr. Rogers things, and, you look for the person that can do good and the person that's going to make you feel safe. Well, our job is to make parents feel safe. In 9/11, and we're about to have the 20th anniversary of 9/11, one of the hardest things for parents it was that they were so anxious, not unlike now.
Yeah.
And that it was hard then to contain their anxiety to help the children. The more contained parents are, the better the children do. So that's why this community talk, where you're sharing what is a very difficult thing, diminishes your level of anxiety when you know that it's shared.
Okay.
Back to you.
No. I want to say, so like on the one hand, it's very empowering to think like, okay, the most important thing is the family unit. I play this huge role. So that can be the most important thing. I can contain this for my child. On the other hand, that's a lot of pressure. Like we are trying to hold our lives together. People have their work situations have been impacted, everything about our daily lives. And we're trying to this is the expectation. Mom's like, we got to keep it cool, keep it calm, everything. And meanwhile, okay, can I read this?
Yes, but
question from Casey?
Yes, but what I want to say is I'm really not talking about keeping it calm. I'm talking about keeping it real. And that means not calm all the time.
Yeah.
It just listen, when we don't have a pandemic, we are not calm all the time as parents. Oh my God. Add the pandemic, add sickness, add everything. It's not that. It's being real. And when you lose it, then saying, oh, I lost it. I'm sorry, honey. I was upset. Too much. It's having the relationship. It's not managing everything perfect. Okay? So it's the relationship we're talking about.
I think that's a really important difference.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because I want to. Okay, so this was Casey's question. All right, where should I start? Seriously, should I start with that I'm in an anti-mask, anti-vax school district with 3 kids? Should I start with I have an immune-compromised child that is too young to be vaccinated? Should I start with that I had to rearrange my whole schedule to take my vaccinated oldest to and from school because when I put him on the bus the first day of school, no one was following the guidelines and wearing masks? How about I just start with, I'm tired of explaining why we won't let our kids attend school in person, tired of explaining to family members and friends why we won't be able to be around them. But mostly I'm just tired of parents complaining how masks and vaccines are the devil and it's their right to endanger my children further to protect their freedoms. I'm just tired of it all. I mean, my heart breaks for Casey, and I hear that she just put it all there.
You put it all there. And Casey, I am so sorry with everything you're contending with. But I want to add to the fact that of how tired you are is how angry you are. When people are asking you to explain the obvious, it doesn't need explanation. People know why you're not seeing somebody. They're putting you in a funny position. When you can't put your kid on a bus because people aren't doing the things that would protect other people, it's enraging. And I think one of the hard things for all of us in this is what do we do with being mad?
Yes.
And when we can't be mad, we can be exhausted, as well as the fact that you are handling way too much. And for you, and we can get back to the anger, but I'd say, Casey, for you and for a lot of other people, you're handling things where you don't have agency. You don't get to control what you feel like you need to control to make it okay for your immunocompromised child, for your child going to school, how to handle your work, how to handle schooling. These are such difficult things. I want to come back to timeline because we can't change all these things that you're talking about, and that makes you feel incredibly helpless. But it is going to change. It's just the timeline is off. We need it to be 4 months from now when kids can get vaccinated, when we can start seeing that we have, maybe the surge will calm down, but if not, at least we know that we can protect our own. And we're not there yet. So you're in a waiting game where you're too tired to wait anymore. What I think you need to do is talk to people. I want you to know you're being heard now. This is as bad as you're describing. You're not distorting it. You're not neurotic. This is real. So the question is, when something's real, what can we do to mitigate it? And that is partly to talk to other people, partly to get a new timeline, problem solve for the next 3 months. When I started this thing, I said, we're trying to problem solve for 3 weeks. Now we know enough that we know that we have to problem solve for a longer timeline, but we also know some of the things we can do. Then coming back to the anger piece. I think we all are trying to figure out what to do with our anger. And in general, in development, when you're helping children with anger, you're trying to help them move it from something sort of primitive to something effective and assertive. The problem right now is we're all feeling pretty primitive with our anger because a lot of primitive stuff is coming at us. That's what I was saying before. People are doing things that are endangering your child, Casey. That's as primitive as somebody can be.
Mama bear is coming out.
Mama bear is coming out. And so what can Mama bear do? You can claw, but that's probably not going to be effective. I think it's finding a way to use this to be assertive. Maybe that's with relatives that you have to say, you've got to be kidding. Why you're wondering why I'm not coming to see you when you're exposing my children to a very serious illness? I'm a mother. Don't be silly. Or where it's getting involved with being effective with your school board, being effective with voting, being effective in some way so that you don't feel helpless. There's passivity and there's activity. And I think we're all trying to find a way to be active that really helps the anger. Yeah. So that's my first thought about it.
Maybe, I want to speak a little bit more. I think that's really helpful. And I want to speak a little bit more to some of the specifics of what women are saying about expressing actually some conflicting feelings of anger and guilt. Mm-hmm. They want to be a good person and feel empathy for anyone who gets sick, right? That's what, in general, right?
Yeah,
in the world, that's how we think of ourselves. That's the person we want to be.
Right.
But then they're also saying, I feel angry because the same people getting sick are the ones being cavalier and endangering my family. Suggestions for managing this anger?
Well, I think, first of all, to acknowledge that, let's get the guilt out of it. First of all, thoughts don't make things happen. These people aren't suffering because we're mad at them. They're suffering because they've chosen an adventure that leads them to this point. So, that, and it's normal to feel some, satisfaction is the wrong word, some feeling of, okay, that's the reality. They've chosen this and what's happening to them is something they've made happen. So it's okay to feel that way. The guilt part would be if we actually encouraged it to happen or somehow we're agents in making it worse.
When the opposite is true.
Right. Now, I think if you're a frontline worker, and I really admire every one of you out there, you don't get to be mad at your patients for what they've chosen. Well, no, you get to be mad. You don't get to act on it, but you do get to feel it. A feeling is always okay. It's what you do with it. So feeling angry that people are making these choices, that's nothing to feel guilty about. Feeling a lack of empathy, well, empathy has to do with identifying with a human condition. This is not something you want to have empathy for. You want to have empathy for the people that are struggling, that are terrified of vaccines because they have had bad histories with it, or that there's a cultural history against it, where there's a struggle about vaccination. But the people that are doing this to make some kind of point, that's not something one needs to have empathy for. So does that make me sound like a mean, horrible person? But then, hey, I'm a professional mean, horrible person. You can identify with me or tell me I'm terrible, and I won't be offended. But I think that we don't need guilt to get in the way of feeling what we feel and acknowledging it's okay to feel it, and then decide what to do in the realm of how we like to live in the world.
What do we do with it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's helpful. I think that's freeing, because instead of focusing on I shouldn't feel this way. Why do I feel this way? This isn't productive. This feeling isn't helping me. Well, okay, just accepting the feeling and then thinking, how do I channel this? How do I get support so I can, do the things that I want to do in the world, to be the person and, the mom I want to be.
And I also think, it sounds so petty, I think it's good to distract ourselves some. There's a 24-hour news cycle. Your children are going to school. We're worried about them being sick. You have something bombarding you all the time. I think all of our emotional life can settle down if we give ourselves some space. You don't get to give yourself space from your children, from your work, from your spouses, from all of this. So we need mental space.
Yeah.
And whatever that is, it's important. Not just, I'm not trying to sound like some magazine thing saying, oh, you should put yourself first. But in a way, I am saying that. I am saying you need to have supply so that you can meet the needs you have to meet. So figure out how to supply yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually, we are at time.
We're out of time.
And that's actually
Okay.
but that's the perfect.
Oh,
that was actually
there you
where
go. An
hoping
ending.
we'd land, because I think in terms of what do we do with these feelings, you know, what I'm hearing is share your feelings, get support with, you know, other people who can you talk to, reach out, and that they're going to be glad to be there for you in the same way that you're going to be glad to be there for them, and just accept that support. So you're not alone. Reach out. And then secondarily, you know, if you want to do something, channel that and do it with the people that you're reaching out to. Let's do this together. And finally, I love this notion of distraction too, and giving ourselves permission to do that. I mean, I know, you know, eating an ice cream cone last night just felt pretty awesome and carefree, and just playing soccer with my kid in the backyard right now.
Ted Lasso.
Oh God.
Ted Lasso.
I caught up last night.
I haven't got caught up yet.
It is a treat.
Okay.
Oh,
but it's you know, we are all the center of our own stories because we need to be. But stepping outside of our lives for a little bit in any way we can, it helps you restore your balance.
Okay. So what you should do is click on the link in the comments to go and get some support and talk to other women to debrief on this conversation, and maybe figure out some other things, other ways that you want to connect with other women in your local community, if there's more you want to do. And then if you haven't watched the latest Ted Lasso episode, just go to your, you know, DVR or however you treat yourself to such things. And is that outdated now? Are we DVRing? Are we streaming? I don't know.
You're talking to a 72-year-old woman. Please.
Wherever you do those things. So those are the assignments. Get support. Do something. It helps. It makes you feel better, and watch Ted Lasso. So I think that's it for us now, Debbie.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this so much.
I'm thinking of all of you out there. There's your hard times, but not forever.
And thank you, everybody, for opening your hearts and sharing so much. It helps other women. So let's keep being there for each other. Good night.
Good night.